Call the meeting to order of the Middleboro Gas and Electric Commission, Wednesday, July 10th, 2019. This meeting is being recorded by the Middleboro Community Cable Access Media and Verizon and Comcast. It's if you want to watch it on the commission meetings at your convenience, the Middleboro Access Cable has on-demand viewing through the internet, and it's mccam02346.com in your web browser, and at the MacCam website, click on Government Access and choose Middleboro Gas and Electric for the various meetings on view, and the video will open. Where's Jeanette?
Right over there.
Thank you. That's new, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll start the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll have announcements and recognitions, and Crazy Days is up in August 2nd and 3rd, 2019. Oh, hello. Yeah, hello, again.
Hello. Year after year we run these Crazy Days, and year after year they're more interesting and more fun. So here's a copy for you to enjoy. We always bring you a poem. That's no different this year. Actually, you don't have to share, because I don't have enough for everybody.
I'll get one.
Share?
I'll look at this. Yeah.
Share.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How have you been?
Fine, thank you, Mr. Healy, and you?
Nice to see you.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So here we go. August is the time to groove with Crazy Days from Middleboro on the Move. This and other exciting news we are here to promote. 2 milestone birthdays that are worth making note. Middleboro is celebrating its 350th year. 2019 has given us so many reasons to smile and cheer. Because anniversary 125 we observe for our gas and electric department, well deserved, I am sure. So now is a great time to see all the wonderful things our town has in store. Lining the streets will be vendors, activities, visitors, and more. A celebration for everyone, so come on down, because Crazy Days is back in town. August 2nd and 3rd, Friday and Saturday. It's so much fun. You'll want to stay all day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further announcements and recognitions? Unanticipated? I'm sorry, what?
No unanticipated.
No unanticipated. And public comment, Kimberly French, Sustainable Middleboro, Clean and Renewable Energy Goals. Kimberly, hi.
Where's best for me to stand on this room? Does it matter?
I don't think so.
Okay.
You can face the camera if you wish. I mean, it's right there.
I'll just stand right here, kind of sideways. So at the last meeting, we presented a couple of goals that we would like you to consider. I wanted to have a conversation about those, but first, we also told you that we've been attending various workshops and trying to learn more about the energy sector, and we did attend one in Lincoln about battery storage and learn something else. And learned one other thing that we wanted to bring back to you. So I'm going to have 2 of our members just tell you very briefly about battery storage, and then Jody Edmonds-Perry, and then Linda Bargo will have another thing to say about something we learned at the workshop.
At the workshop, the 2 speakers were Jerry Frankel of Frankel Consulting, an electrical engineer specializing in low power systems, and Brett Simon of Wood Mackenzie Power and Renewables, an energy storage analyst and market researcher. And here are my takeaways from this workshop. There was strong consensus that there's no advantage to waiting a few years before acquiring battery storage. Yes, in the very long run, prices can be expected gradually to decrease, but both of these experts expect no significant innovations or price reductions in battery storage technology in the next few years. And there are price fluctuations caused by a variety of outside forces. A couple of years ago, there was a price increase caused by a whole lot of demand from South Korea, which was not anticipated in the domestic market. Batteries have several benefits. I may be preaching entirely to the choir here. First, they are cost-effective already. The payback period for front-of-the-meter batteries, what MGE might acquire, is typically less than 10 years, or even less than 8 years with grants when they were available. Today's front-of-the-meter battery's lifetime is currently 20 to 30 years, though there is some degradation in the later years. And secondly, battery storage can be used flexibly in various ways over time. Save cost of purchasing expensive power to meet peak demand, and can create revenue by selling excess stored power. Also increase resilience. They make the grid more reliable against unexpected events. They can reduce or eventually eliminate the need to purchase the dirtiest energy or to generate relatively inefficient peaker energy in order to meet peak demand. And they can support the transition to 100% renewables. The Mass Department of DPU, Public Utilities, the DPU, in its 3-year energy efficiency plan approved in January, included battery storage in the measures that the state's efficiency funds can be used for. This expands the definition of efficiency to include flattening out demand peaks. 4 hours of usable power is the current norm for front-of-the-meter batteries, while behind-the-meter batteries, consumers, are inching up on 3 hours worth of power. This is enough power to cover a peak. Brett Simon predicted that current storage technologies can probably enable getting to 75% renewable energy, but he said that getting to 100% renewables will require the development of other technologies that will enable longer storage. He does not expect batteries will ever be able to do monthly, let alone seasonal storage. I think we're lucky here to have the option of Northfield Mountain hydro storage as a possibility. At least 6 municipal utilities in Mass have acquired or are in the process of acquiring energy storage systems. Most, like Sterling, Braintree, Templeton, and Wakefield, use lithium-ion batteries, but West Boylston's is a flywheel system. And a less common type of battery is now in use by National Grid in Shirley, not in Uni, obviously. It's a but it would be applicable to a Uni. It's a flow battery system using vanadium redox technology, and there's going to be a tour of the Shirley facility on July 19th, in case any of you are interested. So I hope this has been helpful. I've got a few copies of the executive summary of a paper by Todd Olinsky-Paul, project director for the nonprofit Clean Energy Group, entitled Energy Storage, the New Efficiency, that includes some nice lay-friendly graphics on pages 8 and 9. This paper is specifically about the new eligibility behind-the-meter consumer batteries for energy rebates from Mass's investor-owned utilities. Consumer batteries that are hooked up to discharge to the grid during peak events can be a significant help in shaving not only the large peaks, but the smaller peaks. The rebate program shares the resulting cost savings with those consumers. And I also watched a video of a recent webinar on the same subject with speakers from National Grid and Eversource. And although this state program does not apply to MGE customers, obviously, I found these materials helpful generally in learning more about demand reduction and peak shifting. So I will share these. And speaking of demand reduction and peak shifting, Holden has begun a Save the Peak education program, which our Linda Hargill will speak to you about, and she has some handouts as well. I think I only have one from management. I'm sorry, I meant to have 2.
So at this summit, we learned that Holden was in the process of putting together some materials. I guess you already know about that. And they actually had a presentation yesterday, their first one. I don't know how far along people are with our Shape and Peak program, but our group thought this could be something maybe we could help with. So I reached out to Jane Dye, who's the
she very kindly forwarded me some documents. I was actually able to get into the first document you're going to look at, which is a Shade the Pink flyer, which maybe could be used as an insert with the bill or for some kind of communication. I didn't quite finish it because I don't know what the actual web address would be for people to log into, but we thought that was helpful. The second one is a press release that did go out and it announces 2 meetings. One was held yesterday and the other is later in the week. A third is a list of outreach possibilities, what their town is using for possibilities for communication. And then the very last thing is a PowerPoint presentation they came up with, which Jane, their new general manager, decided not to use. It was too complicated. It's simple, but it's too complicated. She made it much simpler. So you can have it for what it's worth. And I do have a few extra pieces.
No, we appreciate that. Holden just had a change in their general manager,
Yes.
and their previous GM did virtually nothing on this at all. Jane Parento came from Reading Municipal Light, which is the second largest of the municipal light plants, which has a lot of really robust programs. And so she's using some of that expertise now to start to bring Holden's programs. They're going to revise their rates completely. They hadn't had a rate study in forever, so she's making really good changes there. We've had actually peak alerts now for, I think, at least the last 2 years that we've been putting out through social media and through our website.
And that's actually one thing we wanted to offer you, which is that, through our networks to our Google group and our website, we would love to be, we'll be on your alert, but we want to work together and help amplify that message. We're very interested in doing that. So I just wanted to come back to the goals that we put forward last time, and I brought a couple pages for you. So last month I gave you some attachments. I didn't print them all out, but I have, actually, I don't know, maybe just take 2 pages each and on these. But so the goals were that we would like this commission to talk about, consider, and eventually adopt are 2. They're fairly simple. One is to set a goal of becoming 100% non-carbon emitting by 2030, and that would be meaning could include nuclear, you could include other energy sources that our state doesn't consider renewable or clean. That goal of 2030, we propose that because that is consistent with the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which I gave you a summary of, saying that if we can't keep our rise in global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius or less, we are going to see probably irreversible and very, very dramatic changes starting in 2030. So this is why we feel it's so urgent again. And and the second goal is to be 100% renewable by 2050. That date is consistent with our state's goals goals that are in the Global Warming Solutions Act that our Senator Pacheco authored. Currently it's at 80%, but there are bills now to try to get it to 100% that are in front of the state legislature. Last month when Bob Castle was here, I was really, I'm not an early adopter either. I'm only looking into solar and electric vehicles and things like that now myself. So I appreciate that. I know in our conversations with Sandy, she's talked about, who's doing this, who has given us models already. And Bob Castle said, you don't want to be the first or the second, to do something. And in this case, you do not, because there are several munis that have already, set these goals and in some cases achieved them. And I gave you some information last time about Concord and Belmont. They started buying RECs, but they are now working on PPAs, which I know Middleboro Gas Electric is too. But they've gotten there very quickly. Concord has a goal to get between 50 to 100% renewable. I believe, I have it in my report there, but I think it's in the next year or 2, depending on what they can manage. I know your own survey that you had in 2017 also said that in at least the majority of customers in most cases would be willing to pay more for more green energy and target goals and energy programs, and so I think that I want to just point your attention to the survey that I did. I talked to or saw documents for 5 different municipal utilities to talk to them. What impact has it had on your rates, or if you're planning to add renewables and increase your percentages? What are your projections on that? And they've been actually very small. I mean, Concord is only about. Concord is also at 15 cents per kilowatt hour. It has a slightly higher flat rate, 12 as opposed to 5.30, which Middleboro has. But I mean, the rates are not that different, and they're expecting to get to 100%. Belmont, the same thing. Their rates started higher, but they raised less than 1 cent. And they said it mostly wasn't because of the renewables, because they hadn't done a rate change in a long time. So I just wanted to have a brief conversation with you. I hope we can continue. And I'd like to hear the commissioners what your concerns are about these goals, what would make it work for you, and I'd just like to hear if you agree with us on the climate science from the United Nations, that it feels urgent that we do this in the next 11 years. So I just open it up, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm a firm believer in 11 years isn't going to make that much of a difference. We've been ahead of the curve. We want to meet any goals that the state comes out with. I don't know about the UN, but we're going to look at batteries at some point in time, but only as convenient for the town of Middleboro and our ratepayers in Middleboro and Lakeville. I mean, that's the only thing we can do. If it's not conducive to our needs at that point in time, we have to wait until the technology gets up to the level that's needed.
Batteries?
Right. Well, especially batteries. I mean, I would say they'd have to improve quite a bit before we get involved with a battery setup. It's just with like a simple electric generator that we put in. I mean, it doesn't come up and be functional right away. It takes a lot of work and money to get it up to that point. And if we're going to spend the money for our ratepayers and keep the rates as low as possible, and with a well-trained staff.
We are actively looking at battery storage too. In fact, I'm going to a manufacturer tomorrow who have a proprietary technology that a lot of what they represented to you, I'm hearing things that are from battery manufacturers that are conflicting with the information they gave you about the life of the battery, about the prospects for the size of the battery, and also the cost of the battery and the efficiency of the battery. So, that's what has been a concern for me, that I've met with battery manufacturers and marketers now for the past 2 or 3 years, and they all readily agree that the technology is going to improve quite a bit in a relatively short period of time, the same way that solar panels did. And the cost of solar panels came down quite a bit. For Middleboro, our challenge for getting in on that battery grant was one of scale. The 2 megawatt battery, which is the size that we would really want to look at, is the size of a tractor trailer truck. It's a huge investment, so it's something that you really would appropriately site at a substation. Middleboro, unfortunately, because of our 125-year history, has a substation that has significant location problems next to the river, with the football field behind it, with a hill, downtown, the busy street. So, and we also need to renovate that building or demolish and replace that building because it no longer meets our needs for security in particular, but also for our workers. So the timing just wasn't right for us to apply for one of these battery grants because you had to actually, follow through on the project. What we plan to do, though, is with the development of a second substation, which we desperately need for a system our size, to be only connected to one transmission company, National Grid, leaves us vulnerable. And so we've known for a number of years, have been developing this project, that it would make sense for us to interconnect with Eversource at the southern end of our system, so that we're actually moving along very well, making good progress on site of that substation would be ideal for a utility-scale battery, which we would likely have behind the meter, not in front of the meter, because that's the way we would reduce our demand so that we would incur lower capacity and transmission charges. So that's the way that the other municipal light plants are using these battery resources. So, I think it is something we're looking at. What I would suggest is that we take some of these things that you're asking, recommendations you've made, we need to do a lot of analysis on them. There are significant differences with the way some of the other municipal light plants have adopted this. And, Belmont is 35% more expensive for their rates than Middleboro. So the impacts are definitely there.
But Concord is similar.
Concord is somewhat similar, but it's a very, a lot depends on what the portfolios were to start, what projects you were in. Middleboro's in some projects,
Sure I do.
and that will continue. And those are valuable and important projects for us
Because I have an
that have kept our rates reasonable.
So would you say rates are the main concern about adopting those goals?
No, I wouldn't say it is, and that's where I can't speak off the cuff directly about this. We need to look at it, but Wellesley, for example, had a very expensive study done with a goal of converting to this renewable, higher percentage of renewable energy, and their consultant came to the conclusion that they could never get past 80%. There are a lot of big factors at play here, so that we need more time to do some analysis, some assessment of where we are. We have minimal resources that are fossil fuel based in our current portfolio. We don't plan on adding more of them, but we also are in a difficult environment where if something were to happen to either of the nuclear resources for which on which we rely, we have to fill that void. And if we're buying energy on the market, we need something that's going to be reliable, that's going to be cost effective, so that, if we were to add 5 megawatts of solar to try to replace something, there will be no solar output in January on most days, but people want their lights on. And storage will not solve the problem of an extended period. So, these are much bigger picture things. So that coming up with targets for 2030, but especially 2050, I think is very, it's like having a board vote that cancer will be cured by 2040. We don't have a cure for cancer. So, taking on a legal obligation, the state is going to be in trouble with the Global Warming Solutions Act. They are going to have trouble meeting their legal requirements, even though they're throwing a ton of money at it, a lot of energy at it, because they haven't dealt with the vehicle sector.
Yes.
So the transportation sector is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and they're not doing anything yet. So, we really want to devote some significant resources to starting to grow that end of our response as well, starting next year. I mean, we don't have unlimited resources, and we're all very busy right now, but, there are things that I think we can do that would be creative and really move the needle in this region. So
we would like to be in continued conversation and learn more ourselves,
No,
and also help you, and also
Yeah.
do some homework, and because we're hearing different things. I mean, and I'm open to learning. What's the discrepancy here, and why is one person saying one thing and one person saying another?
Oh, because, there's a lot of money involved here.
Right, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
Where's the motivation?
Yeah.
But I just wanted to bring it to you again. We'd like to keep this conversation going.
No,
These
I think that's
are our
fine.
goals.
No,
We feel it's urgent.
absolutely.
So,
I think it's essential that we continue the dialogue
yeah.
and understand the dynamics, and that's what Jackie's reflecting is. That's sharing is what we need to do.
Yeah, no, I would definitely encourage you to come, because we get an audience here instead of having just employees. And I wasn't trying to discourage you, but Jackie and I have had these conversations constantly, and she's always that she is a tremendous asset for Middleboro, and we've been all over this all the time. And the only thing I can add to Jackie is that I've always wanted to, whatever the standards they come up with, I would prefer to exceed them as opposed to just meeting them.
You mean the state?
Well, whatever the state comes up, we don't have a choice anyway, but moderately in conjunction with the funds that we have
Right.
for the town of Middleboro. Because I saw a pundit last week stating that the United States could get their carbon emissions down to zero, and if nobody does anything about China or India, the carbon content for the world is still going to go up. So
So the state currently requires 14% renewables for the investor owns. And so, I mean, one way to avoid having regulation on the munis would be to, keep up with that or even get out
oh,
of it.
I agree. I totally agree. But it's as long as we've got a planned operation and it's going in steps, and hopefully the technology is going to climb from what it is right at the moment.
Well, and there's so much happening in state government right now. There's the municipal light plant bill that Tom Golden sponsored. They've had hearings for that recently. The Green Works bill, the $1.3 billion. I mean, those are resources that because we're a municipality, we could have access to some of those for some projects, for help with planning some projects so that, these are exciting developments. But that municipal light plant bill is something that is a very significant step in the right direction. So, we feel strongly that why wouldn't you support it even if you want to go farther, because it gets you partway there. So, I question the people who are disparaging about it, because at least it gets you partway there.
Well, I think one reason is it creates, it codifies an exemption for municipal light plants from the state goals, as opposed to, whereas the roadmap to 2050, the 832 bill, I think actually does, it lets the munis make their own plan and work
somewhat. I mean, I think what we are really wanting to protect is that local control, because every community is different, and some are going to want to go at these things more aggressively than others. We aren't Concord or Hingham. We do have to really watch the impact to our customers very closely. And, one of the things that we looked at is what the impact of an additional 2 cents would be on the town of Middleboro. Would be an additional $170,000 a year. Now, this at the same time that we know the bill for, electricity for the police department's going up. We know it's going to go up for the high school because they're larger footprints with more bells and whistles, even though they're built to an extremely high standard. So these impacts are very tough on municipalities. Ocean Spray has to be a concern as well, because their bill would go up over $500,000 a year. And I spoke to the person who does the energy buying there. They talk to us every quarter about what projected energy costs are. They're very focused on it. They would be gone if our energy prices went up, beyond a small percentage. So they would be moving to Canada or Chile. The tariffs have hit them hard. So these are things we just want to be really cautious about, because it would have potentially unintended consequences.
And I just have to say, that is our concern too.
Yeah.
Especially for people who are low income, especially. But we're very sensitive to that concern and appreciate the fact that
I think sharing information is the key.
Okay.
We need to spend more time with you sharing information and talking about the issues and the policy development.
So I'll bring you more information.
Yeah.
Keep talking, and if you would like to come with us to any of the workshops, to the flow battery tour, any of that, we'd be happy to carpool. Maybe even an electric car.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll do my agenda. Review and possible vote to accept and release the open session meetings for June 5th, 2019.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we vote to accept and release the open session minutes of June 5th, 2019.
Second. Motion?
Any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain the vote. I was not present at that meeting.
Okay.
Before we get to the second one here, do you want to do all three of them, or do you want to do them individually? Because they're all executive session minutes.
I think you should do them individually.
Yep.
Okay, that's
so,
fine.
yeah.
Okay. It's all right. Just thought I'd run it by you.
Yep. Review and possible vote to accept and release executive session minutes. We'll start with January 16th, 2019.
Mr. Chairperson, I make a vote to accept and release the executive session minutes of January 16th, 2019.
Second the motion.
Any further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain?
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
opposed or abstained, not present.
All right.
Okay.
You are all three.
The minutes of October 17th and 2018?
Mr. Chairman,
2018, yeah.
I make a motion to accept and release the executive session minutes of October 17th, 2018.
I'll second it.
All right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? October 18th, 2017?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Murphy speaking once again. I make a motion to accept and release the executive session minutes of October 18th, 2017.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. New business, review and possible vote to approve bid award for a gas division vehicle. Dave? Dave Shaw, gas division.
Gas Division Operations Manager. Gas Division is prepared bid specifications for a four-wheel drive, four-door utility vehicle, which was sent into 4 local dealerships. Vehicles will be replacing the 2006 Ford 500 was voted to take off the road back in April. It had 152,000 miles on it. This new vehicle would be replacing that 500 and giving it to Danielle Hayes as the gas division engineer. All 3 bids had minor deviations. Rodman Ford, Foxborough, Greco Ford of Rainham, and Colonial Ford of Plymouth all submitted bids. Rainham Ford, I never got a bid back from them. The lowest bid was Rodman Ford, $34,645. And my recommendation would be to award the bid.
Even though it didn't meet the specs, none of them made the...
It was minor. It was
Oh,
a
minor
CD,
stuff?
They didn't have a CD player in it.
Oh, okay.
Compared to the package.
We let you listen to music while you're on...
Well, they got a radio, but not a CD player.
Okay.
I thought it says here it didn't have a remote start. It didn't have a
It's
remote.
only educational CDs.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
All right.
Excellent.
I went,
Greco Ford was a different style tire.
Yeah.
But there's $800 difference between the two, so, and they're all the same package, so I would say go with the lowest bidder.
All right.
Rodman Ford and Foxborough.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the bid proposal recommended by Dave Shaw of Rodman Ford in the amount of $34,645.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, Dave, I have a question. I'm just curious. This vehicle is just used for Daniel Hayes to come back and forth to work. What are the requirements of that vehicle?
That would be for at work, going back and forth to work, also at work. She would keep all her records and stuff when she comes out to job sites, gate wrenches.
So that's why you're requiring to have a larger vehicle, four-wheel
Right.
drive.
Right.
She's on call 24/7.
Situations. My question, the other question is to, and this probably go to Jackie just as well, is it, if we purchase these vehicles, and this is, you may think that this 34 grand is just a little drop in the hat, but it's actually a pretty big number to the average person. So, on a whole, how many fleet vehicles do we have? Because we purchase them individually, but don't we have, how many vehicles do we have? Do you know, Dave? And you're, just like in the gas department, you guys,
I'd say the gas department has 10.
10, and the electric
The
department
electric
probably
probably
has
has
12 or 13.
And then I have one.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a
Like
fairly
you
sizable
said.
fleet, but we beat the crap out of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because of the work that we do,
Yes.
so that we did lease 2 electric vehicles, hoping that they could be used by the meter readers, and it was kind of a disaster because
They fell
they have to use a radio, and as soon as they plugged in the radio, it drained the electric battery within minutes. So, you know, and they were too small, really, for the size of the equipment
Right.
and all the stuff they had to carry. But we also were worrying all the time because they were lease vehicles, and we didn't want them to, I mean, they're driving on unpaved roads to get to meters in remote fields. So leasing has been a bad, you know, it was a bad experiment, and we plan to buy an electric vehicle because we do want them on staff, and so that's a plan for later this year. We have it in the budget. But we have people on the road all the time, so that we do use them. And the Ford 500, for example, with 152,000 miles on it, those are hard miles.
Yep.
And so, I mean, especially like a bucket truck is doing mostly local driving, we would never get to that mileage on a bucket truck because it would have been impacted by the conditions under which they operate and would no longer work as we need it to work sooner than that. So depending on what the vehicles do, they have a longer or shorter life.
I guess my concern is that if we've got 20 plus vehicles out there that are being used, some of different capacities, is there some kind of a leasing contract with Ford? It seems like we're always with Fords mostly, or maybe you have a couple of GMCs in the mix over there, that they could put together some kind of package that, you know, you turn these cars in after 2 years, or these vehicles, these SUVs in after 2
Yeah.
years, and then, you know, that's also in the contract that they're going to sustain a certain amount of wear and tear in the process of their use. That we wouldn't just every so many years drop $35,000 on a brand new vehicle.
We can look into that.
I mean, I think that's just my hope is that, you know, going forward, that it's not just business as usual. You know, I understand we need a vehicle.
Right.
Totally don't disagree with that at all. And she needs to get to where she needs to get to as long as carry her equipment. But I just think that, you know, going back to what we just listened to for over 25 minutes, is the ratepayers are really important here. And the bottom line is we're pulling $35,000 from the ratepayers to put someone in a new vehicle that I know myself personally, I could walk into a dealership and walk away with a $2,500 down payment and drive away in a brand new vehicle and have to pay, you know, 2 years worth of payments, which may not add up to $35,000. So I'm just hopeful that, you know, let's follow up on that. Jackie, I appreciate that, and you know, thank you for your help today for bringing this to us.
The last 2 vehicles we've gotten at the gas division are actually hand-me-downs from the electric. We have 2 pickups that have been pretty banged up. Where you're throwing compressors and you're throwing compactors in the back, they get banged up pretty bad. To be a leased vehicle, I wouldn't want to see what the bill is at the end, the body work.
Well, again, that has to be the conversation with the dealerships. And I've leased vehicles for probably 25 years.
I do too.
I just like to be able to have that conversation and say, there's going to be a fair amount of wear and tear, which doesn't, you know, impact the price and value of whatever the payments are they might be. It might be beneficial, it might not. But I just think over a fleet lease, we might have a better opportunity. And again, that goes back to Jackie, not you guys, specifically. And I think that if they want to give you the hand-me-downs from the, you know, whatever the case may be, maybe you got to do a kick a little harder for that one, but get a little better. But I think that it's just something I wanted to bring that conversation up. So, you know, instead of having vehicles, SUVs, maybe it needs to be that utility truck. So if something goes in the back, you know, smaller vehicle, like Colorado or something like that, or
I have a pickup with the engineer, you got the CGIs, FIs, all the stuff that
things that need to be
enclosed.
enclosed.
So that's
I
why I
agree.
go with the SUV.
Understood. All right, thank you.
I have a point of clarification on that. Are you asking that we do several vehicles at once on a lease?
That would
Like,
be,
what is-
that would be the, I think, the most economical way. You know, again, I've never been involved with it, but certainly to entertain the conversation with a leasing company for a fleet lease.
I don't
Absolutely.
know any leasing company that doesn't want them back in a way that they can't sell them again. though.
And certainly in a commercial
Nothing
situation.
wrong with them.
Yeah.
I think some of the challenges we have, though, especially with the larger vehicles, is that they need to have other equipment added to them, so
Yep.
that we have to buy the chassis and the bucket separately
Right.
and have a lot of work done on them. So,
Yeah, I understand.
that part is a bit more challenging, but I'll definitely investigate it, Paul.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, we have the
I'm sorry.
first and the
This might
second.
be a stupid question, but the electric vehicles that are being used for meter reading, is that correct?
We returned them after
Oh, you
the
already
lease,
returned them.
it ended, so we do plan to buy another electric vehicle. And we really want to expand our alternate fuel fleet, but right now, for our requirements and for the size of the territory, we can't rely on finding a charging station for vehicles that are used in, say, recovery operation when we've had a blizzard. And there is an electric bucket truck. Braintree, thank God, deep pockets, municipal light plants that own generation tend to have money for these kinds of things, like battery projects. They're going to get an electric bucket truck. I think it's, to use the old expression, it's more for showing than for blowing. It's not something that you could, again, rely on in a blizzard, but they'll use it as a service truck out on the road at times. And there are some electric bucket trucks that portions of it are electric and portions of it are gasoline. So it's kind of a hybrid concept. So we're going to look at that as well in the future.
I just wondered if they're not going to be, when we have the smart meters, does that eliminate the meter readers going out and you have some savings there?
Even with smart meters, we're still going to need to be troubleshooting. The smart meter programs have lots of quirks to them. So basically, every single day, it'll spit out the 20 meters that weren't showing that they were being read. And if you see the same 20 meters show up multiple days in a row, you know it's a bigger problem, and it wasn't just the UPS truck was parked to block the signal. So it's something that's going to be kind of interesting. But, the role will be reduced over time, but we're not there yet.
And I believe that in Chapter 164, there was a requirement where a person had to see the meter every so often. Now, whether that's changed or not, I don't know.
Well, the gas meters, we have to change out every 7 years. So we do replace all the gas meters every 7 years, but we also every other year do a survey of every year we do a survey of half of our system, so that our gas division workers are inspecting the service at half of the customers' houses to make sure that everything is proper. So yeah, we'll still need to be out there in the field.
And will the smart meters need to be replaced every 7 years too?
The gas meters, we are going to not have to replace all the meters with smart meters. We'll have to open them up and put in a new communications module in those. So we'll have to put our hands on every one, but you wouldn't want to replace all of them at once because you still have that 7-year obligation. So we'll continue on a cycle for the gas meters.
Thank you.
It's less about the meter and more about the connection that requires that survey, because they're doing the sniffer and all that as well.
Mr. Chairman, we have the first and second on this here.
Yep. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, discussion and possible vote on selection of 2 commissioners to meet with Jackie Crowley, general manager, to negotiate the new general manager contract.
Mr. Chairperson, I have
My contract ends at the beginning of August, so that it would be time to discuss a new agreement.
Mr. Chairperson, if I may, I believe, Jack, you've done this in the past.
Yes.
I don't know if you're interested in continue to do that, and I don't know if you might be interested as well, Mr. Chairperson. We need only 2. We can't have 3 involved.
I know that, but Jack's more qualified than I am.
No, I mean, with Jack, you and Jack, would you be willing to work with him?
Who do you heard from?
Well, Paul, I think,
Yeah, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, I certainly have called you and asked you and told you that I would be more than happy to volunteer to negotiate this contract. And, I just want to put a little bit of the history out there. I don't come to this board just some guy that lives in Middleboro. I've been working in the retail business for over 47 years. And of those 45, I've actually been involved with unions and with union contracts. And I've been in management in that retail business for 35 plus years. So I understand the ins and outs and the goings on of how we've had to do business with a union, as a union member, as well as with members of our union. And I certainly understand the language, and we've talked over, we've actually had conversations in these meetings with Jackie and some of the things that come up in her contract. And I think I'm highly qualified to come alongside Jack, and we could probably do a fine job to negotiate a contract with Jackie and bring it back to this board.
well, I'll amend my statement. You're more qualified than I am, too.
Now,
I've also
now,
been
Ellen,
involved with unions
yes,
for 38
Ellen,
years and done negotiations for 2 different boards, so
would you be interested, Ellen?
if Paul would like to do that, I can acquiesce to that.
I mean, between Jack and you.
I know, but if Paul is,
Yeah.
Would you like that? Well,
I am,
That's fine.
let's just throw out a few
there's more
motions
than
here.
one need on the.
Right.
Well, that's it,
Right.
this
So-
next one.
Right.
But I have had a lot of
Okay.
experience as well with union negotiations.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, if I may, you can discuss. If I may, I'd like to make a motion that we have Jack Healy and Ellen Farley serve on to meet with Jackie, the general manager, to discuss a new general manager contract. That's my motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would disagree with that. I really would. I would like to be the person that negotiates with Jack.
What if Ellen did the second one, the management benefits?
Yeah, that would sound reasonable. So I could,
And Paul did the first one.
So you're
Quite
going to have
frankly, I think they run together. They really do. That's just my opinion. And everything that goes through that negotiation comes back to this board anyhow.
That's correct.
As
Exactly.
either correction or agreement,
all right.
in my opinion.
I think that's
No, you're right, Paul.
So I think to disrupt the negotiation by having more than one person come in and out of that particular negotiation, since it's solely with Jackie, I think would disrupt the flow of the trust that you probably have to endure as soon as you walk through the conversation.
Well,
We were just talking about 2 people.
Right.
on different aspects of this negotiation.
We're not going to vote on both of them. No. All right.
Well, I still stick with my original motion that we have Jack Healy and Ellen Farley serve to work with Jackie Crowley on discussing her new contract. That's my first motion. Whether we have a second or not, let's see. That's my motion.
Well, do we have a second?
I'm gonna let Paul do it if he wants to do it that much.
Ellen said she let
I
Paul.
make a
I told
motion
you that I
then
would-
to, since that one failed, to
Get a second.
what's that?
It didn't get a second.
Well, since I'm one of the 2, I think somebody else should make the motion and second it.
Okay.
But let's
Do you want to amend your motion?
No, let somebody else make the motion. I'd rather stick to the original motion that I had.
Then I'll make a motion that we go forward with Jack Healy and Paul for Jackie's negotiation of the new GM contract.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion. I mean, even though I'm mentioning it, certainly can second the motion, right?
It's all right with me. Any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye. No.
Okay. Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Discussion and vote and possible vote to select two commissioners to meet with Jackie Crowley and the general manager to negotiate a new, oh no, we already did that. I'm sorry. Discussion and possible vote of two commissioners to review management benefits with general manager Crowley.
Mr. Chairperson, I make a motion to select Commissioner Jack Healy and Ellen Farley to review management benefits with General Manager Crowley, in all fairness to the previous.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Oh, aye.
Two opposed? Three to 2? I think so. So it's 3 to 2. Annette. Discussion and possible vote to adopt a public records exemption for confidential terms of power and natural gas purchase agreements and related information to support MG&D, Middleboro Gas and Electric's Department's ability to enter into competitive energy contracts. This is that thing we were discussing. Yep.
We've recently gotten public records requests that are extremely broad for contracts and all supporting materials for our power supply agreements. We haven't received one for our gas supply agreements, but we received them for all of our solar power purchase agreements and interconnection agreements. And we really do have an open book policy for everything, but some of the information in these contracts is highly confidential, particularly for the companies that we're engaging with. And there are confidentiality provisions in the contract. And we do have in the contract that they recognize that we are a municipal light plant and subject to public records law. But it is something where if we are vulnerable to all details of every contract, it could have a very negative impact on companies having an interest in dealing with us, particularly with proprietary technology. So especially looking at, I have to sign a non-disclosure agreement to go into this battery storage factory tomorrow. Cummins, when we did the generator that we had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We're doing work with them right now on adding a sound wall. We have to sign non-disclosure agreements on that. So my point is that if we were to adopt this language that I got from Chris Pollard from KP Law, we would be able to judiciously and as rarely as possible redact information that is competitively sensitive that could have a negative effect on our ability to get competitive pricing. So I would recommend that you adopt this provision, because until you adopt this provision, we don't have the ability to redact. But I think it would make sense, because we don't want to be in a situation where good, competitive, creative, there are some companies that come up with very interesting, solar plus storage, ways that they handle the load. First Light, for example, some of the designs of transactions they were to bring to us regarding hydro plus solar, they may not want those to be available. And what is frustrating is that I think some competitive entities have realized that they can get a lot of market information for free just by asking for it. And the communications are digital, so it's nothing. So we got a very broad public records request about a month ago from a solar developer. They want to build more solar in Middleboro, so they ask for all the details on all of our solar contracts. That is very valuable competitive information that, we gave to them because the contracts don't have a lot of meat in them, but I can see that this is an advantage that we're giving them that they should not have. So I would recommend that you adopt this provision.
Now, this is proprietary information.
This is information that's considered confidential within the contract. So it's likely, in the case of a power supply agreement, it's going to be the price, and it might be if there are special aspects to the service that have great value. They might want to consider that confidential, the structuring of a complex deal.
Now, would that be done, Jackie, in consultation with legal counsel?
It would be in consultation with the other counterparties' legal counsel, and if it became really complicated, I might have to consult with our legal counsel, but I think it's going to be pretty straightforward. And the other thing is that if someone really wants the information, they can challenge what we have redacted legally and question the validity of our exemption, and they might win. But it means that they have to put some skin in the game to get the information.
For that reason as well, I think consultation, we should probably condition this on consultation with our legal counsel as well.
I don't know that I want to incur the legal costs because the price of the contract is going to be what I would typically redact. If they have other provisions they want to redact, I'm going to warn them that they're being unreasonable or they're being overly cautious, that they have recognized that we are a public entity and that we are subject to public records law, but that we have this exemption that might be in place that could protect.
Well, other than price, if they're requiring something other than price, would we consult with our legal counsel?
If you do power supply agreements, you kind of know what I've done these for 30 years, and I know what the valuable details are that they would not want a competitor to see. So that there might be some other provisions in this that would need to be redacted, but it will primarily be price. I'm not even sure I would redact volume. I think it really would be price.
Do you think that more often than not, that's all it would be is price?
I think that more often than not, that is the case. But we do, we have an agreement with NextEra for a load following that is a hedge on our power prices. And it's based on NextEra's production from Seabrook. But NextEra has provisions in that agreement because it's a creative agreement that gives us a buffer against any price increases. So their lawyer is looking at this latest public records request and is going to let me know what they think they would want to see redacted. And then I'll argue with them if I think they're being overly cautious.
Well, can we authorize you to contact counsel?
I have that right anyway. The GM has the right to hire lawyers.
Go for it then.
Mr. Chairman, just to Jack's comments here. I mean, I'm reading the article that you would like us to vote on, Jackie. And, I went through these chapters and sections this afternoon, and I really didn't see. Maybe you can point them out to me somewhere that allows them to ask for the information that you're trying to, let get loose.
It's not...
Not like, not to hide something. I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean it way sound.
Yeah.
I meant that, so that we are our information is protected.
Right.
So, because when we start right up in pursuant to General Law 164, Chapter 164, Section 47D, it really covers us in a situation of confidentiality. And then you go on further in this talk about energy purchase agreements, including PPAs, which again are already covered. And then it goes down to Section 10 of Chapter 66 in General Laws, extend and provide for such PPAs as a non-disclosure agreement. So someone can still request from you, and we have, or you should have, a person in place to be able to pull those things up. And if it's a request that is too great information or too broad a spectrum, you have the right to send them a letter and say, well, it may take a week, it may take a month, it may take a year, but you have the right to do that.
Somewhat. The state really expanded public records stringent now. Chapter 164 doesn't really speak to that, or it used to protect us the way that you're describing, but because the state expanded access through Freedom of Information Act requests.
So that supersedes what you gave me back in 2017 for the general laws?
I think that the way that it's been read is that it is so broad that we have to provide it. And then we've gotten indication as well from the state that the limitations on, like we can tell them it's going to take us 10 hours for somebody to put together at $20 an hour, so that you can choose to pay $2,000 to get this or not. But the problem that we've had is, for example, this public records request that came in for all of our power supply agreements, the only one who's familiar with these complicated agreements is me, so that. And they asked such a broad request that we would have to collect information from all of the projects that we're participating in since the 1980s. So, and none of those are digital records. So that, and we don't want to say no to these people. So we want to give them what they're really looking for, but we want to give it to them so it doesn't hurt us in other situations.
Well, certainly not at the ratepayer's expense. If it's going to be, burdensome, I mean, that needs to be the request answer. If this is burdensome and these are the reasons why, pull it back in. Only problem I have with this whole comment, and it goes to the end, where it says the general man pursuant to general law, chapter 164, section 56, has the authority to negotiate appropriate confidentiality provisions in non-disclosure agreements as deemed to be in NPD's best interest and interest of its customers. That in itself is a broad spectrum of any kind of public record that you would be allowed to not have to give.
But it could be challenged if I abused it, if I were using it inappropriately.
Well, I didn't think for a second you would abuse it. I'm just concerned that if it's in black and white, we're going to vote for it, we agree with it. But I think that's an awful lot. That gives you power over this book. A little bit, not completely, but a little bit. And I would rather that there'd be two pieces to that, like someone else, like us.
The statute, though, actually gives the GM full power of the entire operation, so that
absolutely.
I can negotiate power supply agreements. This is just saying that for a public records request, I can redact what would be appropriately confidential in the interest of the ratepayers. So I don't think it really broadens the powers of the GM any more than what's already in the statute.
Then I think that's how it should be worded. And because that's what you're looking for. I just don't see it to be. I think if someone else could take this and assume it to be, more than just redacting, statements that would be. If it's already proprietary, you can't. That shouldn't be disclosed anyhow.
But I have to.
But if it's someone else's proprietary thing,
it doesn't matter right now because of the way that public records law is written. I can't redact anything right now. If I am following the letter of the law. Even if, we sign an agreement that says it's confidential. We're an open book, and it's the way we conduct ourselves in pretty much every way possible.
Right.
But we're getting, this request that we got is from an anti-pipeline group in the west of the state. They want to prevent an extension of Tennessee Gas Pipeline. Now, one of the people involved in the background is a company that, it's actually, my old boss is very involved with it, and he believes that utilities and natural gas companies are trying to husband pipeline capacity in order to drive up the market and control the market. Now, the way that he's trying to get this information and use it through this anti-pipeline group in the west of the state is to ask for power supply agreements from the only people obligated to give them to him, which is municipal light plants. and all of their power supply agreements. Now, we represent about 14% of the power consumption in the state. So this group is going to have boxes and boxes and boxes of paper or bursting computer files that only represent a tiny fraction of the power usage in the state, but from that information, they're somehow going to use it to build a case to prevent a pipeline expansion project. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. But they have the right to do it, and we have to respond. And we have to respond with no redaction if we haven't adopted this provision. So we're in a lousy position so that I can contact these people through the process, which goes through the town clerk, and I can say, we would estimate that it will cost $5,000 to get all this information together. Are you willing to pay this? But I don't want to be an obstructionist either. I don't want to look like we're trying to hide information, or I would much rather say, here are volumes of information, but the competitive pieces that could harm our ability to negotiate contracts have been redacted.
So the bottom line is, you don't want to ask them for money, you just want to give them everything, but you want to be able to cross out things that they shouldn't see.
I want to be able to cross out things that a seller would object to a buyer making public.
But I think you should charge them, holy cow. If it takes you $5,000, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Well, it's something that, has been done at times in the past, and it's hard not to look like you are stonewalling. And in fact, my predecessor GM had us giving quotes for costs for responding to these public records requests. Most of it, I don't get paid by the hour. So that if I stay after work for 4 hours to put together a good response to a public records request, it's not costing the ratepayers any more money.
No.
It's better for me to do it than for Jeanette to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Because it would cost the money then. So honestly, what we want to be is honest and forthright and respond to what they're looking for, but people are taking advantage of the broadness of the statute right now.
All right, to that point. Records officer, a records access officer appointed pursuant to, section 6A out of chapter 66. That's really somebody we should have in place that should be able to understand these types of things. So you should never have to be there after hours filling out these types of things.
But we don't have anybody else on staff, nor could we hire somebody who understands what is of value in a power supply agreement. People with that kind of expertise come at a very steep price.
Well, understood. I understand. And, we don't want, again, the bottom line is we don't want to hurt the ratepayer.
Right.
We certainly don't want to, be, inundated by requests that burden our regular, daily business.
That's the hard part. We have no control over that, though. Right now, anybody can ask for anything.
I feel like these laws are in place to already do that. And when we come into making an agreement for this particular statement, I lost my page, then I just feel like we become lawmakers, and we weren't voted in to be lawmakers. But I mean, that's my concern.
I think that the public records law was actually expanded since 2017, and
Right.
that's why, the goal is to have more sunshine on all of these documents, to be more responsive.
Correct.
There are articles in the paper every year about towns that refuse to share information that they're legally obligated to share. So that, that's really where this is coming from, that under the current law, we don't have the ability to redact information that could be damaging to the competitiveness of our ratepayers' options.
And this hasn't been litigated yet.
It hasn't, but that's the problem. Who wants to fight public records law requirements that people be comfortable opening their books? Yeah.
Very expensive.
It is. It's really, it's a very tough situation, and it has rarely happened, but we have had, I think this is our third enormous one this year that are, and I called the company and said, do you honestly want all of this? Because she's going to get this from 40 companies. It will be a massive data dump that nobody can handle. But, she's been told that they kind of want this information. Most of it has nothing to do with that gas pipeline, but, they're using the tool they have at hand. And in some ways, you sort of think you're trying to pester us to death.
Yeah.
But we don't have the right to say no.
This would give you the right.
This would give me the right to redact
Right.
a modest amount of information. She's still going to get a massive data dump.
Yeah.
So, that's the tough part.
I think you should stop charging them, quite frankly. But those are my concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan, what do you want to do?
Well,
Look at,
we need,
And I move approval of the
Yeah.
request.
I'll second that.
any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain from that vote, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. That was a good contribution.
Thank you.
It was kind of interesting, but
I don't mean to have anybody's eyes roll in the back of their heads, but
No,
I just feel that when we're presented with chapters, sections, and whatever, how can we have a constructive conversation if we don't know what we're talking about here? So,
Yep.
I mean, it was important to get into that. And
Yeah, it was good.
I think the board made a good decision.
Yep.
I don't feel comfortable with it.
No, and a number of the other municipal light plant GMs immediately said, I'm going to give them a quote that's going to be really high, that would recognize how much work this is going to be. But then there was another wave that came back that said, we, as municipal light plants, we are painted frequently as obstructionist, as old-fashioned, as resisting change, as, closing information, not sharing, not open. And, that is completely unfair. We are anything but. Our boards are people who are elected by the public. We have open meetings, we have them on camera, we have them every month. Some of the systems have more open meetings than others, some have bigger boards than others. But there was concern that if people put out these quotes to this entity, $2,000, $4,000, $5,000, that again, we are painted as trying to block clarity. So, and it's anything but the case. So that's why some of the GMs who would normally have gotten the wagons in a circle said we have to stop that misconception of what a municipal light plant is. We serve the people and we serve their best interests. So we like the light of day on everything we do.
Just a point of interest. If I go to the Brockton Town Hall and ask for a birth certificate, they charge me $15. There's something to think about.
It might get it to the point where we have to.
I just think that further down the line, if it continues, and they're asking for boxes of paperwork, that, I, as a ratepayer myself, would be happy that we're accepting, fees for that certainly, mountain load of information, which probably sits in somebody's storage unit and doesn't even get looked at.
Well, and it's a tough thing because I'm required under the statute to provide a copy of every agreement I sign to the town clerk. They're maintained at town hall. So everything we do, and it's, a document every week, a document every other week. Why, and I've wondered why these record requests then don't go through the town clerk, who has people who are going to look through those records and provide the information.
Right.
But no, it comes to us. It's more efficient. We know what we have. We know what we're looking at. You can't ask somebody who doesn't understand these contracts at all to be the one doing it. But yeah, so we have redundant records. But if I don't provide those agreements, they're actually in the Chapter 164, it has penalties for not providing agreements.
I guess my hope is that I would I would hope that you would bring those to us in the situations that you had to get inundated by so that we could at least be aware of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
But, the other thing, like we talked about, if at some point in time, we might need somebody on staff that can meddle, not at your level,
Right.
but...
Well, and we do get requests for things that I don't get involved with. So, Sandy coordinates the responses. Typically, Jeanette gets very involved. But when it's something that's related to energy supply, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Old business.
Old business. No old business.
Excellent. General Manager's report.
All right, financials. We are, I want to gloss over these because we're still on the electric side. It doesn't look great, but it was a very mild May. We've also had a very mild June with very little air conditioning load, so that we are still treading water, but our big volume sales, which recover a lot of our costs, happen in July and August, and so that's still to come. We're still all right. On the gas side, as usual on the gas side, we make most of our money in that first couple months of the year, and then we start to come back towards, a smaller return by the end of the year. So, because we come into the year in the winter, we're calendar year. So the gas division is contributing to the rate stabilization account right now, while the electric division is significantly drawing on it. But it's still within that $2 to $4 million band, so we're not going to change our rates at this point. I know that gas number is going to come down quite a bit for the year, and I know that electric number is going to come back from being a negative $2 million. So, and what's driving all of this is our targeted return, which is a return that goes right back into the plant. And we have to have that targeted return so we can maintain our system for the coming years. So we can do the repairs we need to do, make sure that the lights stay on and the gas continues flowing. I will say we've had, and we're going to continue to have, a lot of really unfortunate expenses this year that are related to a lot of compliance things out of the Merrimack Valley incident in the fall. We are currently in 3 different audit processes that we're involved with, paying very costly consultants to work with us on multiple gas safety programs. I don't have the confidence that they're going to make us any safer than we were a year ago because we keep our system pristine. We're very cautious. They will help us in other ways, though, because they are showing us ways that we can plan for the future so that we can manage change within our staffing. So, I'm not going to gripe about them too much, except that they're costing us a lot of extra money this year. $60,000 for a consultant here, $40,000 for one there. We have it built into the budget. It's a necessary expense. It's unavoidable. The programs are being required by the state or by the federal government. And hopefully, after this one big year, after the Merrimack Valley incident, things will start to calm down a little bit. So we are having an increasing compliance burden on that end that's fairly significant. All right. So we're in very good shape for the year. And I would say that we should do better as well because the capacity costs will start to come down during the month of June. We should see some improvement. Those are the costs that have been about $1 million a month. And so we should see that come down about 25% from that. And so that will be a great help for the second half of the year and for the year after. They come down again starting in June the following year. Transmission costs, on the other hand, are doing what they've been doing for years now and steadily creeping up. So that everything we can do to reduce our peak will reduce the impact from both capacity and transmission. There is a page, I'm not sure you got it, but I have the latest Rockland Trust statement. You have the page that shows that based on the current investment of the OPEB trust funds, that we are funded to 91.5% of our liability.
excellent.
So
Yeah.
we're doing great, and it's even better for the statement for the month of June, but who knows what the market will do. So we're on a really good track there. All right, getting to rates. This is like last month. This is a remarkably low demand month for both electric and for gas. It's going to be your lowest, among your lowest utility bills of the year, which is a good thing. But because the usage is so low on the gas, the rate goes up a little bit because that customer charge, that fixed cost, is spread over fewer units. So Middleboro at $1.62 a CCF, that's a great rate. That's a very competitive rate in this region, but your bill's going to be pretty low anyway. Electric, June, this is based on the average residential customer's usage for June, this rate. So had we had a hot June, that rate would probably be 14.9 to 14.8 cents. We had a really mild June, so our sales were lower, customers' usage was lower, so 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Again, it looks really good in this region, particularly compared to our investor-owned utility neighbors. So customers are saving 35 to 40%. The bill that you see for the month for the average customer combined is about $140. A little less than that for Middleboro for the two. You get to Bridgewater is where they really take a bath. It's $78 more than the charge in Middleboro. Mansfield is about $12 less. And their gas rate is higher, but their electric rate is lower, but the gas usage was low that month. So, you see that kind of a balance. But these are significant savings for most households when you're looking at $41 in Wareham and Carver, Belmont $42 with their electric rate. All right, I did some numbers that I've done this before in the past, and I really like to do this kind of analysis, and I'd like to look at some benchmarking as well over time, but this is natural gas sales from 2009 until 2018. This is really an indicator of how the economy came back in this region and how we have great demand from customers who would like to convert to natural gas or would like to increase their gas load. The green is interruptible. That's all Ocean Spray. Ocean Spray has dual fuel capability, so they can do their manufacturing processing on oil or on gas. They primarily use gas. It's a much cleaner fuel for their equipment. They have emissions limits, so they can't burn much oil. But we're able to give them a very competitive price because we basically cut them off from gas completely or partially for between 40 and 60 days a year. So this is a special rate that only Ocean Spray has. They're our only dual fuel customer in this category. But you can see that blue section, which is the firm customers, the commitment that we have to supply them forever, 365 days a year, is growing. And there's great demand for growth, but because of our moratorium right now, that's going to be capped. We really can't be accepting any more customers who are going to impact a peak winter day. So we might see some modest growth other times of the year, but that's going to kind of restrict our ability to grow much. Of course, this number is also going to change depending on how cold a year you have. So if you look at the next page, I find these kinds of graphs interesting. The line at the top, the thin line, is heating degree days. That's the number of times in the year the temperature was heating degree days, below 65 degrees. 65 degrees is considered perfect, no heating, no cooling temperature. So that when you have something above it, when the average temperature is 70 over the course of 24 hours, that's a 5 heating degree day, or cooling degree day. When the temperature is 50, that would be a 15 heating degree day. So nobody's going to be using air conditioning when the temperature is 50. They're going to be using a little heat. So that you see that annual heating degrees, because it's heat requirement that drives natural gas use primarily. And this is only the firm customers, so this excludes Ocean Spray. They're processing. They're not heat driven. So you can see that 2018 was our highest heating degree ever, or in this analysis. So it was the coldest winter we'd had in a very long time. And so this, because it's a calendar, we're looking at January, February, March, November, December. So we had cold patches at both ends that caused us to get to that 707, or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't the coldest ever, but it was the highest usage. So that's an indication of the load increase, the firm customer increase that we had with customers, either developers adding multifamily apartments on South Main Street, or the one that's on Grove Street, the Woodlands, the development that's there. You know, we were seeing load growth, but now we're capping that, so we're not going to be adding to it. But you can see that I misspoke, the heating degree days was not the highest ever. That was back in 2014, but was extremely strong over that winter after we'd had a very mild year in 2016. And then you can see 5-year averages, and this always gets kind of interesting because this is why our rates are unfortunately going to be a little higher both for gas and electric. We have a very heavily residential customer load, so that you see that enormous dip, so that we don't have a lot of industrial and commercial use that goes through the summer. We have, you know, multiples higher demand during the heating season than we do in the summer. And that's where electric generators are accessing natural gas that isn't needed for heating in those summer months in order to generate electricity for the higher air conditioning load in the summer. So they complement each other, but it also means that you can't get natural gas in January and February for generating electricity because it's all being used to cover heating load customers. And that's where, you know, for companies like Middleboro, we'd like to see some modest pipeline expansion so that we can satisfy our customers' requests. But there's a great deal of political difficulty in adding any pipeline capacity in the Northeast at this point. So moratorium will stay until we can have some way to increase our pipeline access. So power sales. The blue line in this one is cooling degree days. So this is every degree above 65 on an annual basis. So you can see that in 2018, we had a very hot summer. So you see the blue line is high and the load is quite high. You see back in 2010, we had an even hotter summer, but the load was down, so that we had quite a change in customer demand over that period. And that's from business growth, that could be the economy, that could be more people over the last 8 years have decided that it's essential that they have air conditioning. You know, people used to not have air conditioning. I don't have air conditioning at home. But, you know, clearly more people feel that it's absolutely essential. We've also had the region coming back from, you know, the economic downturn in 2008. So we've seen quite a bit of electric demand growth. But you can see it kind of tracks the cooling degree days. And then we also have the 5-year here as well. And this is, I think this is kind of interesting because you can really see the flow of from one year to another, whether you have a mild summer or a hot summer, it's really going to spike your demand in some interesting ways. And I mean, the point to always keep in mind is that regardless of what the customers are doing, we have an obligation to cover their requirement, so that we have to plan, and ISO has to plan requirements for the region to meet. Right now, I think they're planning on 31,000 megawatts is what they're planning for meeting the load today. When I looked at the load, it was about 18,000 at around 12:30, and they were projecting that at hour ending 19, so 7 p.m., it was going to be at about 20,200. So ISO always has to plan a big cushion because they don't know if something might happen, if a nuke might trip offline, or if, enormous cloud cover can have a great effect on the generation that's coming from the vast solar resources across the state now. They need some kind of resources to be able to respond. So I find this stuff very interesting, and it probably says a lot about me, but you can see that we're in May and June, and we looked at those rate comparisons, so you can see it's a low demand month.
Yeah, but on those peaking, those are the most expensive contracts. You have to...
Some peaking contracts are more expensive than others. Like, we have vintage peaking contracts that we have from MWEX projects that are very reasonably priced and mostly paid for. But other peaking resources are much costlier. Right now, when I looked at it about 1:30, 70% of the electricity being used in ISO New England's territory was from natural gas generation. 70%. So, and ISO uses natural gas because they can cycle it up and down very quickly. Now, I will say, we have hardly any natural gas in our portfolio at all. We have one resource that can run on natural gas, but because of pipeline constraints, it's rarely dispatched. And that's Stony Brook out in the west of the state. And we have a fractional piece of it. But it's there. So, it's all kind of fascinating the way that they plan how to handle these things. They did... I looked at it and made some notes. So 70% natural gas, 20% nuclear. On a really mild day where there's little demand, nuclear will be closer to 30% of that total. But on a day when demand gets high, when it gets hot, it's going to drop down to 20%. Renewables, 4%, hydro, 4%. Both of those would come up if it were a milder day for their share of the percentage. For that renewable piece, a lot of the renewables in the state aren't reflected in that number because they're behind the meter. So the solar that Middleboro has in our territory is primarily behind the meter, so that's not going to show up in that 4%. But what is in that 4%, 38% of it is from burning wood, 35% of it is from burning refuse, so biomass, 15% of it is solar, 9% of it is wind, and 4% of it is from landfill gas. So what is a good story, though, is for today, which is a good, decent summer demand day, 1% oil. That's fantastic, because 20 years ago, that oil number would have been 20, 25%. Coal would have been another 20, 25%. So, natural gas is not everybody's cup of tea, but it's a lot cleaner than oil and coal. So it's helped the region as a good bridge to a cleaner energy future. Anyway, so projects. All right. I am working right now on the RFP for the Middleboro High School solar. I have a draft of the contract, and I'm working on some changes to that. It's more restrictive because the RFP process, because we're bidding for something to go on a municipal building. So there are lots of restrictions you have to do. You have to take the lowest bid, which means that you really want to have a lot of your qualifications out front, because you don't want to take the low bid for somebody with a poor performance history. So I'm working with the town to find out what insurance requirements they would have for the contractor who's going to bid to put the solar panels on the roof for us. Again, because it's a municipal property, we have to make sure that we meet the town's criteria on that. We're working on a gas emergency drill. This is an outcome of the post-Merrimack Valley. We are doing a tabletop drill that's going to be quite challenging. We have a consultant out of Tampa, Florida, who is in the business of putting these together. We're working with the other 3 municipal gas systems in the state, and so that will happen later this year. It will also involve the fire department and the police department, but it'll be a very good exercise, and they're going to give us a report afterwards on things they think we need to do to watching avidly the Green Works bill, $1.3 billion. It could provide some really significant resources, both for the town and access for a municipal light plant, since we're a municipal entity, to some funds. So that's a really exciting development. It's an exciting month because we have the final debt retirement of an MWEC project. We were participants, and one of the, we're a small participant, but this is a larger share than we've had in some other projects. For Project 6, which is Seabrook, the nuclear plant, and we have a 1.7 megawatt share in this project, and we actually have been saving $30,000 a month on capacity value for having the contractual right to those kilowatt hours. So that's been helping us a lot in the face of these other higher capacity charges. But that debt is retired, so we'll get a small check of some of the money that we've had. And that's our last MWEC project that we've been paying for since the 80s. So that's very good news. The new substation, we should be getting the environmental survey shortly. And then we'll have next steps for that. We have to actually meet with the Buzzards Bay Conservancy to talk to them about it, because we will be proximal to some of their protected land. But we won't actually be impacting it. We miss a lot of that area, but out of respect, we want to make sure that we keep them in the loop. We are doing a new survey to explore increasing the area within the fence at the South Middleboro gate station. Things are getting very tight there for what we have, and the lot is quite a bit larger than the fence covers, so that we hadn't done a wetlands delineation there in some time, so we're going to have one done. It's a site that they had talked about for years as a potential site for a developer for a power plant. We've had people approach us for 25 years, 30 years on this, and we kept telling them there's no way you could get the natural gas to run a power plant there. They finally realized that and went away, but this is town land. A part of it is conservation land, so we do want to be very respectful of that. But that one piece that has our gate station does enable us to get a little bit more room, so that we've got the ability to do the maintenance we need to do.
Will we be using any of the town land?
We have the care, custody, and control of that lot. We're not going to expand into any other town land.
But there's about 10 acres, isn't there, about town land behind it?
There is that piece, and then there's another piece, and another piece, and some aren't contiguous, and
But they're upland.
there's a lot.
I'm talking about upland.
Yeah, we weren't planning on using that.
Right.
Yeah,
But
because I think there are wetlands back there, and we don't want to.
well, I understand that, but there is a good chunk of upland.
There is.
And is that contiguous to our property?
To a quarter of it. It's
Yeah.
interesting the way that the pieces are
Right.
set up, so that.
I'm just wondering whether we should be talking to the town about acquiring some of that.
Yeah.
If it's going to be a need.
I'm not sure that we want to go that far back, to be honest. I think that, we try to maintain that site in a pristine manner and keep a significant buffer zone. So the argument for trying to move the fence back and over is to add more buffer zone and give us a little bit more flexibility to do the maintenance that we might want to do, possibly to put in a second generator or an LNG or a CNG skid if we feel that to meet our obligation
But
we
you've
really
got the
do
room to
need.
do that, is that?
Sorry?
You have the room to do that.
I think we would have the room to do that because both of those things would not need a significant amount of space. But the whole thing is going to be contingent on us having that survey done.
Okay.
Yeah. We're making good progress on dealing with our sound challenge with the Cummins generator. We need a sound wall around three sides of it. And Cummins, who we've been arguing with for a couple of years now, the unit has been operating fine. We haven't had any issues. It's more if something were to come up, we want to make sure that we hold them to the contractual obligation. And so they're proposing putting in a sound wall on the front side that's parallel to Wareham Street, and the two sides that would be a 30-foot sound wall. So
On 3 sides?
on 3 sides. So that this is going to be, and it's a proprietary material. Apparently, noise suppression is a huge money-making business now, and they have this technology or this design they've come up with that does a terrific job and reduces sound significantly. So they're proposing to use that in this application.
And this is at their expense in order to meet...
This is at their expense, and actually, we still haven't paid them the last 10% of what we owe them,
Yeah.
because it's our position that they haven't met the contractual obligation.
Right. Yeah.
And so they're going to basically give us back some of that money anyway to cover the legal expenses we've incurred and the consulting expenses for holding their feet to the fire. So it's good.
Yeah.
So this is a good thing. So we're finally making progress on that.
That's good.
It's been very frustrating.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll mention is that we are exploring painting the Main Street building, which is starting to look like a haunted house again. Unfortunately, with a building that old, we have to make some steps to try to do something with it. So we're going to explore some of the ceramic paint to see if that could last longer and get a better result. Because right now, it's lasting 2 to 3 years before it starts peeling, which just is very frustrating. So.
And I would think that we should start planning, for a space where we can get the office somewhere where we could have our own meeting.
Sandy's done some work recently on the electric division building, and we're communicating with some of our peers who build new buildings. We've had an initial conversation with the historical commission. We need to replace the electric division facility with something that will be better for working conditions, give us more space, but the driving concern is facility security.
Right.
So
Well,
we may try to see if we could expand it, because we don't have enough room at the main office right now for the people that we're going to need in the future.
Well, it's obvious you're already thinking about different things.
Yeah.
I'm just saying start the process.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to get moving on those things as well. So it's been very busy.
Yeah. Any correspondence?
Correspondence.
You're going to check with Paul and start the...
Yes.
And hopefully we can get it done by August, which is your due date anyway.
If time is tight and if that's difficult, I really don't mind if, I'm not going to...
I said, all right, let's go, hopefully it goes well. Maybe we'll vote on it on August
because I think we're August 7th.
Yeah, and
6 o'clock back at Town Hall.
And I was remiss in, I know Tom did a lot of work getting us this facility. I appreciate your efforts. It was the best alternate at the time, and he did a good job at that.
You can keep that.
As far as Town Hall, I don't think that's going to change. We're not going to be a priority up to that room. But
Hopefully they'll respect our first Wednesday at 6 o'clock.
well, we pay them an awful lot of money every year. I don't see why we couldn't get some consideration.
Yes.
Is that what we're paying? We just went missed?
No, the pilot.
We were pilot. So, we ran way over. I don't like long meetings. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like
Yes.
to make a motion we adjourn.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.